opening pasuk of our parsha, Ki Seitzey l'malcham alevecha, when you go out to war upon your enemies, and Hashem will place him in your hand, and you will capture his captive. It's known the examinations and analysis of this in the commentaries on Chumash and different Mefarshim that comment deal with this issue. What's going on over here? There's a lot of strange expressions, and it's also it's also in Maamar Ki Seitzey Lashon Yachid. It says not Ki Seitzey but Ki Seitzey. Seitzey is talking to us in a singular, to the singular you. It's not referring to the plural you. When you will go out to war in a singular. When it says concerning the enemy, it says your enemies, because it has a yud after the vase. That yud indicates that it's lashon rabim in the plural. That would be in the singular. So when it talks about the Yidden, we're talking about the plural, the singular going out. When we talk about who your enemies are, we're talking about in the plural. That's one question. Also, we need to understand Maamar Ki Seitzey, where it says when you will go out to war upon your enemies. In addition to the question is, why even say enemies? You're going out to war. You're not going out to war against your friends. It's already implied that's enemies. Why does the Torah have to say upon your enemies? We also have to understand the exact language. It says upon your enemies. Seemingly, it should have said against your enemies. Instead of upon your enemies, it should have said when you go out to war against your enemies. Why isn't it saying that type of language against your enemies? Also, we have to understand what it says at the conclusion of the pasuk, that Havai Lekecha will place him, again back to the singular. You're talking about enemies in the plural, and then you're referring to it in the singular. When the son of Lashon Yachid, he says he will place him in the singular. The option though it's speaking about your enemies in the plural, still know it says you will place him Lashon Yachid in the singular. It doesn't say he will place them in the plural. Also, we have to understand what it says. You will capture his captive. First of all, Mao Kefal Aloshin. Why does it say a double expression? In other words, you will capture his captive. You could say you will capture. Why does it have to say captive? Why does it say his captive? It should have just said captive or captives. Similar to what it says in a different place in Chumash, that he captured captives. Why does it say Shivyai, his captives? What's the emphasis on the word his? This will be understood by first prefacing the explanation of this matter in a person's service to Hashem. The Torah is a directive and lesson in life to every single Yid and every single day. Even when the years are not the way they're supposed to be. It's an expression of Chazal. Like, for example, when the Beis Mikdash is not standing. So even then, the Torah is telling us teachings, even though the literal meaning of the pasuk doesn't apply. This means even at a time that you cannot fulfill the command that when you go out to war in the literal sense, we know that the war that's referring to over here is like Rashi brings down, it's talking about an optional war. It's not an obligatory war. And these days is only applicable a mitzvah war. And what's a mitzvah war? So literally what Eretz Yisrael is going through now. In Milchemes mitzvah is included any war that's to save Yidden from an oppressor that's attacking them. So anytime when Yidden are fighting in Golus, it's not optional. It's not optional. When Yidden are fighting in the time of Golus, it's all considered Milchemes mitzvah. But not an optional war, which the definition of an optional war is to increase and broaden the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, like it's explained in the Rambam, the laws of kings. So even though we do not have an optional war at present, but the spiritual aspect is to be found. This idea of going out to war is applicable in the spiritual service in a person's soul. The idea behind this is, like it's explained in the Torah, the Isa B'Zohar is brought down the Zohar, Shas Loisa, Shas Krova, the time of davening is a time of battle. And it says, which I took from the hands of the Amoiri by my sword and my bow. That's what Yaakov Avinu stated. And from this idea that it says I took from the hands of the Amoiri by my sword and my bow, we derive an association between war, which is the simple meaning of that pasuk, and the idea of davening. Let's see the next page. The Tirgum Onkelos translated, what does it mean when Yaakov Avinu said, I took it from the Amoiri with my sword and my bow? The Targum Onkelos translates, B'tzloisi ubebousi, with my tefillah and with my request. So, even though the simple meaning of the pasuk is talking about war, but the Targum Onkelos associates it with davening. So we see the association between davening and war, and why davening is called a time of war. Because davening is the war that we're having with the Yetzer Hara. This war is daily. Every day a person becomes a new creature. Before the davening, it's considered that his neshama still hadn't yet spread out through his entire body. His soul is still in his nostrils, like it says, like it's brought down the Gemara. Skip the parentheses. This means that the godly soul is before davening only located in the brain. The brain and the nostrils are close to each other. And the neshama doesn't yet expand and spread out into the body. Only through davening. Then it's an auspicious time to be victorious in this war. The godless, through the fact that then it's the revelation of the mature intellect. There is what's called that Lamaila in the Oil Masal Yoinim, it shines a level of a mature intellect, and the difference between maturity and immaturity is someone that's immature cannot control their emotions. Children cannot use the capability of Moyach Shalat al Lev, of the brain controlling the heart. That's immature intellect. Mature intellect is that the brain rules over the heart. So during the time of davening, it's a time when Lamaila, the level of divine intellect, is in a state of maturity, and therefore it's an auspicious time for us down here below to bring our intellect up over our heart, to deal with our heart, and to be able to fight the battle with the Yetzer Hara. Maamar Ki Seitzey. Concerning this, it says, when you go out to war, what's the significance of going out? If it's an internal battle, if I am fighting my Yetzer Hara, what does it have to do with the idea of going out? It says in Shiur, go out and see. So the Rebbe adds, by going out, then va'oz, you will see. Hainu, this means Lot says to leave one state and situation. To leave one's boundaries and limitations until we reach a level that's beyond reason and knowledge. When are we totally going outside of ourselves, transcending our intellect? That's the idea of davening Shemoneh Bittul Shalamayla Metam V'das, a sublimation to Hashem that transcends reason. Though in the beginning we said the intellect rules over the heart and we're using the intellect, that's primarily during Krishma. Following Krishma, we have a bittul like a servant before a king. Though the avoid of davening is likened to a ladder standing on the ground, and its head reaches the heavens. So this level of beyond reason doesn't seem to be what the entirety of davening is above. This means the beginning is from Arza, which is lower than just Eretz, meaning the ground. The Rebbe always brings down from the Frierdiker Rebbe that by adding the Hey at the end, that intensifies it. So Arza is lower than Eretz, and Shemaima is higher than Shemaima, than Shemayim. While still being in the level of Arza, so low, he has to have the full strength of Hashem standing upon him, like it also says by that pasuk where it says that when the ladder was standing on the ground that Yaakov Avinu saw, it was Havaya Nitzav Olav. So there was still an appreciation of something very powerful and great. Through that appreciation of the very high level of Havaya Nitzav Olav, is able to do his service even in the lowest level, the level of Arza. Until afterwards he could reach the level of the heavens. Just like Arza is lower than Eretz, so the Hey at the end of Shemaima means it's even higher than ordinary Shemaim, ordinary heaven. So that is the idea of Ki Seitzey, going out. That one must leave themselves to be able to reach the highest, most levels and leave the limitations of their intellect. Now we're going to go back to the original questions. Why does it say when you go out to war in the singular? Because to be able to be victorious in war, it's only through oneness and intermingling, and we see this by davening. That's why prior to davening one has to accept upon themselves the mitzvah that you shall love your fellow as yourself, like it's explained in many places. Alter brings it down in the Siddur Shenoch. It's appropriate to say before davening, I accept upon myself the positive commandment of loving my fellow as yourself. So he's saying like this: there's another component of achdus in davening that's during davening. In addition to the fact that the davening has to be in such a way that he partners himself with the community, with the congregation. Like it's brought down the Gemara, a person should always partner himself along with the community, which means a person should not daven in the singular. A person should daven in the plural, because by davening in the plural, through that his tefillahs are heard. Whereas if he's davening singularly, so then maybe he's unworthy of his tefillah to be heard. So that is an aspect of davening where we find the unity and the intermingling of all Yidden, because they're going out to war with the Nefesh Habamis, so therefore he has to do it in a communal fashion by including all Yidden in his davening. To such a degree is it necessary to have all the Yidden included in a person's davening. Hashem does not despise the tefillah of a community. Like it says, Behold the God of the mighty, meaning the many and the community, and therefore he will not despise them. So that is the unity and the oneness that we see at the time of davening. Not only that, even prior to davening, when we're going out to war, before the war itself, there's already the oneness, the unity, and the intermingling of the Yidden. Now we understand Maamar Ki Seitzey Lashon Yachid. Now we can understand why it says Ki Seitzey in the singular. By doing that in such a type of way, by having the level of Achdus, unity, so that why there's a poyel u'nesana v'aylekecha b'yodecha. Through that we affect that Havaya lekecha will place it in your hands. Ki liyos hashros shem Havaya zo davkai deis galus. If we want to have Shem Yudke Vavke to rest upon us and rest among us, that occurs through the intermingling. We actually have this, I believe, also in today's Tanya, that the idea of Shem Yudke Vavke comes down when there is the intermingling of the opposites of Chesed and Gvura and so on. So in a similar vein, if we want to have Shem Yudke Vavke, which includes all the spheres together, and higher than that even, because only higher than the spheres can join all the spheres together, that is what is going to enable the intermingling of the Eden, the Avos Yisrael, the joining with all of the Eden, that's going to bring Shem Havaya to come down. So there should be able to be that Havaya should place him in your hands. That's through being one bundle, that the Klal Yisrael is like one bundle. Ad shehem lashon yachid, until we even use the singular form when speaking about the Jewish people. Shivim nefesh, like it says about Yaakov, that 70 soul went down to Mitzrayim. Shivim ha'yuloi, he had 70. V'akasav kaire oisam nefesh, and the pasuk still refers to them in the singular soul, not nefashos. Lahepech ma'esav, the opposite of Esav, shesheish nefashos ha'yuloi. All he had, when the pasuk was referring to him, he only had 6 people. V'akasav kaire oisam nafshos beisay, and the pasuk calls them the members of his household, the souls of his household, in the plural. That's because in Kedusha, in Yaakov, the unity is such that it makes it entirely singular, and that's why he says Ki Seitzey in the singular form, L'mucham alevech. So now, after we explained the Ki Seitzey part, both the singular and why it has to be going out, so now he's going to explain a further issue. What we said, alevech. What does it mean upon your enemies? Though there is an existence of an enemy, and not just an enemy, and enemies in the plural, that he didn't have to even say, like we said before, you're going out to war against an enemy. Obviously, you're going to war, you're going with an enemy. But the point is, we have to emphasize how dire the situation is. That's why there's a need for war. To such a degree that the war that's in davening is in a way of work. It's a work of the heart, it's a toil of the heart, it takes effort. The Rebbe explains in Torah and Parsh Mishpatim, that's in the word of when a person has to work hides. It's a very difficult work to transform animal hides, animal skins, into clothing, into leather, etc., etc. So the avoida, the word avoida, that davening is being referred to, is also, in addition to being transformative, but it takes a lot of work. Mikol Makim, despite the fact that davening and the milchama with the Yetzer Hara takes a lot of effort and work. Hayitzia l'milchama, the going out to work, it's in a way that's upon your enemies, meaning higher than your enemies. This means it's not like he's fighting with someone that's considered a peer, someone that's on his level. As soon as he goes out, he knows that he's higher, incomparably so, from your enemies. And this very knowledge itself causes the victory in the war in a much higher and easier manner than if you wouldn't know this information before going out to war. If you know that you are higher than your enemies, so that itself makes everything easier during the war, the very knowledge that you are higher than the enemies. Concerning this, it says, that Hashem will place him in your hands, or in your hand. It says he will place him in the singular, which doesn't fit in with the beginning. Even though there are Ayvecha that we said is in the plural, there's no need to go to war with every enemy individually. Rather, Hashem places the enemy, all of them, the enemies, all of them like one in his hand, that he's placing him in the singular. What does that mean? So he gives an example from what we find by the war against Sichon. And similar to what we find in the war against Sichon. Why should I make my children have the difficulty and burden to besiege every city? Instead, he placed it in the hearts and minds of all the soldiers to leave their cities. And they all gathered together to the same place. And over there, and over there they fell. And then the road was open to all the cities. From there, Yidden went and took over all the cities without having to fight every single city. Until they actually conquered 60 cities, as it says in Parshas Dvarim. To such a degree that Hashem do this kindness that he placed him. He made it all one singular entity so that it should all fall at once. Not only was that then, but Hashem is going to repeat that as well in the future. Concerning this, we also, in a similar vein, we find this in the Haftarah of the Yom Tov of Sukkot, that over there in that Haftarah it speaks about the war of Gog and Magog. It says, "Vasavti es kol hagoyim el Yerushalayim l'milchama." I will gather all the nations to Yerushalayim for war. So one can look at it negatively. Oh no, all the nations are going to come to attack Yerushalayim. It's just the opposite. Hashem is bringing them all together in one place, so the Yidden don't have to fight them in multiple places. That is one explanation of why it says unesanai in the singular, because Hashem will place them all together so he can attack them at once and get rid of them all at once. Another explanation that Abba is going to say is we're referring to the source, the ministering angel Lamaila, the Klippa that's in charge of the enemies. What it says, he will place it in the singular, not he will place them. It's referring to the root of your enemies above. It says that the Yidden saw Mitzrayim dead on the seashore after the Kriyas Yamsuf. It should have said, Vayar Yisrael es ha-Mitzrim. They saw the Egyptians. What's it mean they saw Mitzrayim? So it's brought down, Shero, as the Chazal say, Shero es sorei shel Mitzrayim l'maylo. They saw the ministering angel of Mitzrayim above dead. So that's what it means they saw Mitzrayim dead, not the Egyptians down here. So in a similar vein, the Rebbe applies this, that where it says, upon your enemies, not just the point that you are higher, incomparably so, but another meaning in Alevecha means to tell you, you are fighting a war against that which is upon the enemies, the ministering angel above. Aldaik, specifically upon the Koi al Sharshim Lamaila. It's referring to their spiritual root above. That's who we are fighting the war against. And that's what it means that Hashem will place him in your hands in the singular, meaning the ministering angel of the enemies. Shezeu b'chinas hamakif the levoina shu hamakif shel eser kisrin the mesavusa. It's the makif of the levoina spice, which is the transcendent level of the 10 crowns of impurity. What's he talking about? In Chassidus, it's brought down that in Klippus, there are, just like in Kedushas, there's 10 spheres, so too there is 10 crowns / 11 crowns of impurity. And these correspond to the 11 spices in the incense, in the Ketores that was brought to the Beis HaMikdash daily, twice a day. Now this, in the Klippus, number 11 signifies the level of godliness that gives a chayes to the Klippus, and that's why it's called number 11, because it's transcends the Klippus. It's in a makif to get way over the Klippus. So their energy of all the Klippus, of the 10 crowns of Tumah, comes from the level of the makif of the 11th level, which is represented by the levoina spice in the Ketores. Shaide hamakif hazeh nimshach lahem chayes. Through the makif, through this transcendent level of the levoina, that's how the 10 crowns of impurity of Klippa receive their life force and vitality. The inyan al-Muhammad ba'ifin the alevecha, the idea of the war in such a way that it's upon your enemies. In other words, you're fighting a war against the top level, to affect the refinement of the level that's upon your enemies. That's the transcendent level of the levoina spice of the Ketores. That's also the idea that he will give it to you in the singular. He will give him to you, not them to you. He will give over. The koi ala makif anal, referring to the level of the makif. So we have really 3 explanations. One explanation is it's referring to Hashem will gather them all together. So you just have to fight one, not multiple fights. Another explanation, it's referring to the ministering angel. And another explanation, it's referring to the makif of levoina. That's in general the power of all the klippas are derived from that transcendent level. Shebezeh toli hakoil, that everything is dependent on this makif of the levoina. V'hainu, this means after they give him the above mentioned makif, the transcendent level. So then, once you have dealt with the original source of their life force, then we don't have to be involved anymore in refining the individual aspects of thought, speech, and deed. They become automatically fixed up because you've gone to the source, you've removed their chayes above. So now he concludes, we had a question, why does it have to even say that you're capturing captives? You're capturing, obviously you're capturing captives, but it also says his captive. Why doesn't it just say V'shavisa Shavi? Shekoi ala avoida ba'olam bebiran tzaitzis. First of all, the captives are referring to the avoida in the world in refining the sparks, because the sparks of Kedusha are in captivity and were imprisoned by Klippus. Shemevarim gam mesenyonim shahoyu kvar b'shvidai vech. We refine also those matters that were already in captivity by your enemies. That's why it has to say shivyoi. If it would have said v'shavisa shvi, that means you would have captured captives. That means they became captives when you captured them. By saying v'shavisa shivyoi, that you are capturing his captives, that means he was the original, the enemy, the Klippa was the original one that captured them. Because Klippa captured these sparks. Then if so, we have to ask, why does Hashem allow that? So the Rebbe says in the parentheses, the possibility for this initially, it's only for the ascent that's through the avodah of a person. That's why, because of the elevation that a person is going to reach by releasing these sparks, by releasing these captives. That is why Hashem allowed that Klippa should have godly sparks in their captivity. Because then when a Yid does it and he gets hold of these sparks, then it's not bread of shame that he's just being gifted these sparks. Allah Adra, but just the opposite. It's the opposite of bread of shame. He worked for it. And according to the suffering is the reward. So I had to work very hard, like we said, that the davening is called avoida. Now, if you remember, we were talking about different levels of davening. So for example, when we were talking about Ki Seitzey, that you're going out, so that's the level of davening that is, you're going beyond the intellect. The bittul of Shemoneh Esrei, we were talking about that it's the singular, that's the idea of the union and the joining that takes place between Yidden, which is even precedes davening. Milchama is the time of davening in general, is a time of war and battle. What is the idea? What's the level of Shivisa Shivya? So we already had the beginning of davening. We already had the middle of davening. We already had Shemoneh Esrei. So ba'avodas hatfila gufo inyan nefilus apayim shalachri Shemoneh Esrei. The idea of falling on the face, tachnun, after Shemoneh Esrei, that is the idea of avodas haberurim, the refining of the sparks. Shu inyan hamesiras nefesh b'shal avodas haberurim. It's the idea of the self-sacrifice that a person has for elevating the sparks. Like for example, a person goes far away from where his comfort zone is, to elevate the sparks over there. The same thing, just like a person falling on his face, indicates, according to Chassidus, the idea of mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice. It's a higher level even than bittul of standing like a servant before his king, which is in Shemoneh Esrei. Now the Rebbe is going to connect all of this with what time of year that we're in. Specifically with the month of El. That idea of the month of El is I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. So the Rebbe says like this. In general, we spoke about this also in the previous Maamar, Anila Doidi is referring to the month of El, and Doidi Li comes about later in Tishrei, especially in Sukkot and so on. But here the Rebbe says, Vahainu, this means in the brackets, Sha'avoida Danila Doidi Payelis should take it from Miyad, the avoida of I'm to my beloved, affects that immediately. Like the Pasuk says, Ad Meheru Yards Dvari, that his word rushes speedily. So Yiya Ha'inyan the Doidali, that my beloved is to me, takes place immediately. Shalachein Nirmaz Gam Hu b'Rosh Tevis El. Therefore, Doidi Li is also part of the Rosh Tevis of El. If Doidi Li is solely an event that takes place, my beloved is to me is only taking place during Tishrei, during Sukkot, etc. So then, Elul should not be Elul; it should be El, because Hanila Doidi, and only Tishrei should be the Ul, where it's V'Doidi Li. The fact that the V'doidi li, my beloved to me, Hashem, turns to me with love, is also part of the Rosh Tevis of Elul. This means that immediately on the heels of my Anila Doidi, Hashem immediately responds with Doidi li. And that whole idea of Anila Doidi with Doidi li, Shazel Toichen in Avodas HaTfilah, the whole idea of davening is to inspire and awaken a love for Hashem. So therefore, the Rosh Tevis of Anila Doidi with Doidi li is primarily has to do with the love of Hashem, the way it's manifest in the avoid of davening. V'ad l'shleimus hatfilah, until the ultimate perfection of davening. Shenirmas masha kosa b'hem shechal parsha. That's hinted in what it says in the continuation of the parsha. Concerning the captive woman, it says, La'achrei u'bachs l'goymer. After it says that she will cry for her parents, Yerach Yomim, a month of days. K'mavur b'sfarim, like it's explained in Sfarim, the Yerach Yomim zeu chodesh el. We had this also, I believe, also in the previous Maamar, last week, that the month of days, that's referring to the month of El. This is what the Arizal says. Shu chodesh ha'cheshvan ala avoida d'shana she'avra. It's the month of El, is the avoida, is the chodesh of making an accounting for the avoida of the previous year. And also, va'achon l'shana haba. It's a preparation for the upcoming year. So after that, after that preparation of the month of El, what does it say? And afterwards, you will come to her and be joined with her. Self-sacrifice shows on total devotion. So that's also like the union of a husband and wife. And we also already said before that the falling on the face of Tachnun is also the idea of self-sacrifice. Corresponding in the year, what corresponds to the Mesiras Nefesh of self-sacrifice, that's by the falling on the face by Tachnun during davening. That's the state and situation that a Yid comes to by Ne'ilah, the final prayer during Yom Kippur, where we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and we are willing and ready to sacrifice our lives completely for Hashem, like it says in the Machzor, that at that time it's a time to do so. And so therefore, it's that idea of the culmination of the Anila Doidi, that we reach this ultimate level of self-sacrifice and devotion and connection with Hashem. And then there's that devotion and connection and joining and union between us and Hashem by Shana Rabu, Shmini Atzeres. That during Hashan Rabbah and Shmini Atzeres, it is an even greater union. Sha'az Nasa Yichud, that Yisrael v'Kutshabrichu, then becomes the union of Yidden and Hashem, ba'ofen in such a manner, the Yisrael u'malka b'chidoi, that Yidden and the king are all alone. That they will be for you alone, and no one else will be with you. That the Chazal say that the difference in Shmini Atzeres, where only one bullock was brought as a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash, whereas over the first 7 days of Sukkot, there was a total of 70 extra bullocks divided over 7 days. It went way down from 14, 13, 12, etc. over the 7 days of Sukkot, where there was 70 extra bullocks indicating the 70 nations. But on Shmini Atzeres we say it's only Hashem and the Yidden alone, just like a king that first made a party for all of his subjects, and then he said his friend, let's me and you celebrate alone whatever's left over. So that's what Shmini Atzeres is about, our union with Hashem alone. And when we're talking about a union, the ultimate way is like it says in Chumash Bereshis, Ad shehoyel basar echad, until they become like one flesh. That is the same idea of the union that takes place between the Yidden and Hashem during Shmini Atzeres. From this parsha we come to where it says next week's parsha, Kisavel arts, it will be when you will come to the land. Coming to the land is also connected with the avoida of she will cry, etc., and all the rest of the things that we spoke about, beginning with the month of Elul and going on to Yom Kippur and Eilah and until Shmini Atzeres. The idea of her crying that we spoke about, the woman, the captive woman, and we said that's the avoid of the month of El, is also an advantage and quality that says about Mashiach's times. Because it says about Mashiach's times, that the Yidden will come back to Eretz Yisrael with cry. So now the Rebbe says something that we also had at the end of last week's Maamar. We're not talking here about a cry that's connected with something negative. That the negative completely becomes nullified. Not only is the negative nullified, that there's nothing but to cry about, but not only that, but the negative becomes transformed to good. Like it says, Bilam, that Hashem did not want to listen to Bilam. And Hashem transformed for you the curse to a blessing. But rather, what is the cry that we're saying that the Yidden will return to Eretz Yisrael with crying? That's also the bachzos of Yavima that we spoke about. It's a cry of joy, crying of joy. Like it says, those that sow with tears will harvest with song. That the one who is going and carrying the sack of seeds is going and crying, he will come with song, carrying his bundles, like we mentioned in the Maamar last week, that when Mashiach comes, there will be such an amazing growth spurt that miraculously the one who is sowing the field will meet up with the one that's harvesting the field, because by the time he's finished sowing, the harvest already began. And obviously this is all done in a way of not a cry for something negative, but a cry out of joy. We fulfill the mitzvah of bikurim, bringing first fruits from the first of all your fruits of the land, like the next week's parsha talks about in Ki Seitzey. From the 7 species that Eretz Yisrael was praised with, since we are going to receive and all the good of the earth, both the physical and the spiritual, so it should be for us in our time, in the true and complete redemption, soon mamash.